So I'll just okay, just checking you guys all can see that. Okay, is that working? Yeah, cool, grand, thank you. Okay, so there's a couple of slides about us. Just in terms of my background, so you know how I got into this sort of stuff. I started out my career as a support worker, working in NHS inpatient settings, working with people with learning disabilities and autism, and spent a couple of years working in that environment, which I didn't really like, and I felt was quite institutionalized. So I ended up moving out of that setting and working with people in their own homes and in supported living. So I spent a few years as a support worker doing that, and then eventually ended up managing what was supported living services. And then after that, I was lucky enough to get involved in working in local authorities and trying to help people via the Learning Disabilities Partnership Board, and then spent some time on some programs which are basically closing down some of those inpatient settings that that I'd worked on at the start of my career, helping people get their own houses, get their own lives, basically just get out of those kind of institutional settings. Kind of met Gary, who you'll hear from in a bit, through that work, who's a bit of an inspiration to me around some of my thinking, and then spent quite a long time in commissioning. Don't hold that against me. I tried to make it really person-centered when I was in commissioning, but we were frustrated often by kind of systems and processes, which is why we kind of got into individual service funds. Was lucky enough when the Care Act came in to start doing some work on that, which was apparently quite pioneering in terms of local authorities making that offer available to people. And then after doing that for a couple of years within the local authority, I kind of came out and decided that we wanted to do it as an organisation. We're a sort of collective of people that really just passionately believe that self-directed support is the right thing for everybody, and should be an option that's made available. So we now work around the country with local authorities and CCGs, and I do some other sort of consultancy work as well. So the big thing for me, that kind of primary reason for a lot of this stuff, was certainly when I worked in those inpatient, those institutional settings, and I worked in res care as well, spent a bit of time in res care. I just found that people were they were sort of recipients of something. And this diagram, I came across this in 2003, one of Simon Duffy's from his book, and I just thought, this is brilliant. What we've got at the moment as a system is people just being grateful recipients of services, basically. But what we need to do is re-engineer those conversations and basically make sure that people are in charge of their own support, and they're seen as equal partners in the design and every element of how they design their lives, which is, when you say it out loud, it's kind of obvious, but it's amazing that services don't understand that and still don't listen to that as clearly as they should do. So so for me, this is the motivation really to get into the stuff that we're involved in now. I'm just allowing people to choose how they design their own lives, and people want lives, not services. That's the message everywhere we go. Everybody says that. We don't want just services. So that's our mission really, is trying to move away from service land and towards personal budgets and self-directed support. So looking at commissioning, when I worked in commissioning, it was kind of doing the same thing over and over every few years, very much doing contracts and residential care, supported living, day services, the same sort of things over and over again. And then people are surprised that there's not much progress in social care, but we weren't doing anything differently, basically. So when the Care Act came out, I was super excited about it. Hello, yeah.
Your slides aren't moving at all.
They're not?
No.
Oh, okay. That's strange. Bear with me a sec.
No, they're not. I can't see any slides.
Oh, okay.
Seeing the whole of the deck of slides. Okay.
Does that work? Is that working?
Yeah, it is now.
Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Brill, thank you. Thanks for letting me know. Sorry, that was the slide I was talking about, and then this is the slide about commissioning being like the the top-down process where commissioners kind of decide what people get in their communities, and then this has always been our dream, and this is what I was always trying to engineer in commissioning, which was really helping people, families, communities come together to decide what they wanted and to build. Most innovation, from my perspective, has been driven by people and families through direct payments. Really over the last few years, I'd say there are some really forward-thinking commissioners, but most of that innovation has happened in spite of commissioning. I would say it's a bit cheeky to say that, but it's kind of how I sort of see it, really. And all the good stuff, all the amazing kind of different variety of support that people access has really come about because of people avoiding commissioning. So the other funny thing working in commissioning for me was always like, I've shown my age here with Groundhog Day, but I keep saying, oh, you must have seen Groundhog Day, and then I realised that I'm like 41, so maybe not everyone has seen Groundhog Day. But anyway, if you've seen it, this idea that ridiculous idea that we have the same day, you have the same day every day of your life, yeah. But obviously in services, when services are commissioned, often it's a weekly support arrangement, and that gets set up and often not reviewed for 12 months, 24 months, 36 months, 2, 3, 4 years, depending on how quickly a social worker comes back out. And I find that concept really funny. Like if I said to you, can you tell me what you'll be doing in a year's time? I bet nobody could answer that. Where would you be at this time next year? But we often set up services quite rigidly, very prescriptively about numbers of support hours somebody's going to have, what times, all that kind of stuff. So I find that really silly as a system, basically. So the answer for me with that, so direct payments are amazing, and I always advocate direct payments as the first choice for everybody. If you want to take full choice and control, grab a direct payment. But obviously what we found in practice was, some people don't want a direct payment, or they can't have a direct payment, because of various issues around Mental Capacity Act and all that kind of stuff, and not having access to a suitable person or a nominated individual, whatever the council kind of calls it in your area. So an individual service fund, for me, when that came up as an option, was a brilliant concept. And I was like, well, okay. So what that is it's basically a person's entitlement. So it's after assessment, it's a personal budget. It's a commissioned arrangement. So it's different from direct payments because it is commissioned. Basically, there's a contract between the local authority or the CCG and the holding organisation, the budget holder. And basically, but you decide who holds your budget, and that organisation works with you to decide how to use that budget. So it's very similar to direct payment, but so you have a lot of the flexibilities of a direct payment, but you don't necessarily have to sign the direct payments agreement and manage the direct payment yourselves, basically. So really simply, this is what it looks like. So there's a contract between the commissioner, so the local authority or the NHS, with an ISF holding organisation that says you can be an ISF provider. Basically, you can hold the budget on behalf of people. And then there's an ISF, there's agreement between you, if you want that organisation to hold your budget, and the organisation that's holding it, that sets out how you will work together. And then what we always say is in your local authority assessment and support plan, which the Care Act is very clear you should sign off and be an absolute part of designing, there'd be a description of the individual service fund arrangement in that, and you would sign that off, basically. So that's how that arrangement works, just sort of in practice, really. Oh, having slide issues today, sorry. Okay, so we did a little slide just to describe what it looks like as a sequence. So it's very simply, the council works out how much money is in the personal budget with you. You would choose a holding organisation, so an ISF holder. They would obviously do some planning with you around how you want to use your budget. The council would check off the budget and say they're happy with it. You sign an agreement with your holding organisation to say this is how we're going to work together, this is the support they're going to provide to you. They would set up all the payment stuff, set up your support, and then you kind of get on and live your life. And the council will obviously from time to time check how it's reviewing. So it's obviously very similar to a normal process, except you have the opportunity to work with that organisation to redesign your own support and decide how that budget gets used. So one of the questions we get quite a lot is, or we hear about areas where people are saying, well, we don't offer ISFs. Or the local authority said, no, we tried that and it didn't work, so we're not doing any more of it. But so we're always keen to bring people's attention to the Care Act and the Care Act guidance, which is really clear that people have, basically says you have the option to find a third-party holding organisation to hold your personal budget. And where that is not available locally, the local authority should be developing it as an offer for you. So we're really keen to say to everybody, don't let, if the local authority says no, there isn't an ISF offer, ask them why and really put some pressure on them to try and deliver that, if that's something you think would work well for you, because they really should be working towards developing an offer for you locally. And the NHS, same situation really. So if you've got a budget that comes through continuing healthcare, or you've got what they call Section 117 aftercare funding under the Mental Health Act, you have a right to request, and because it's the NHS, they've called it a different name. So they call it a third-party budget, but it's essentially, it's the same thing as an individual service fund. So it's your personal budget held by a third-party organisation. So again, you have an entitlement to ask for that if you're funded by the NHS as well. So there's two routes to getting hold of your personal budget through this. So just in really simple terms, so why they're good for me has always been they put choice and control back with people and families. You get nearly all the benefits of a direct payment, but obviously you don't have to be an employer. You know, you can have an organisation sort of take care of all of that for you. Like I said, still support direct payments as the #1 option, and not everybody has any issues with being an employer. This is just a great option for people who don't necessarily want to do that. We don't say it's like the best option, if that makes sense. It's just another kind of option in that range of options people should have for how they take their budget. Obviously, you can make day-to-day changes to your support without having to go back to social workers. So that's a big one. So you don't have to keep asking for permission to make changes. So you're allowed to have that flexibility. And obviously, like we said earlier, the way things are done at the moment, often with people locked into time and task stuff, it's really inflexible and rigid, and it's not person-centered at all. And they're wasteful. They're wasteful systems, really. They don't work for people in real life. So we know ISFs are good because ISFs have been around for a long time. They've been around since the 90s. So they kind of started out in Scotland. So again, Simon Duffy and Dorian Kelly and a few of the guys pioneered this sort of approach in Scotland before it was even a thing, really. They just said, look, we're just going to treat this lump of money as a person's budget, and we're going to work with them to figure out how to use it. So they did some great work in the 90s and early noughties around this. And then they did a study. There was a study 2014 just to have a look at the outcomes for people that had been using that type of budget. It was a long-term study. It's between 2008 and 2014. And you see sort of every single person found some kind of improvement in some area of their life, which is not really surprising. But it's just interesting to see that it's been proven through sort of academic research as well, basically, to say people's lives, you know, people using individual service funds have said that they felt better in lots of different parts of their life, basically. So this is a map of England, obviously. And so when we started doing this, cool, it was 2 or 3 years ago. We sort of went out and we said, like, who's doing ISFs? Let's try and find examples where they're available, you know, across the country. So this was back in 2018. There wasn't many examples, and so we did the same exercise. So we just did the same exercise in January this year. I did a freedom of information request to all the commissioners, all the English councils, basically, to ask them what they're doing. And you can find this map. I should have said there'll be a link. We can send out the link to this, but you can find this map on the Citizen Network website. But there's a lot more councils than there were 3 years ago, so that's a positive. So there's definitely more areas where you can have this opportunity to ask for an individual service fund. But there's still lots of areas where they've either not bothered replying or they're not offering ISFs. And we think, and our mission as a group and as a collective is to try and turn those areas from red to, you know, in this diagram it's blue for available, but we're trying to get every council in England to develop an offer so that people have the choice of this. And so just linked to that, this is just some of the areas we're working. And again, I'll share these slides with you. You don't need to, you know, write any of this stuff down, but we're working in lots. So there's a lot of councils that want to do this. They just don't know how to do it. So we've been lucky enough to get invited to work with quite a few areas now around the country. And just heard today, we've been asked to do some work with children's services in Bristol, which is amazing as well. So that'll be the first, I think, in the country example of that, because there's nothing in the Children and Families Act that actually says you're entitled to an individual service fund. So they're just wanting to be progressive in terms of how they do their commissioning. So that's it. So that's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of individual service funds, what they are. And then I'm going to hand over to Gary and Jacqui, and you can hear about some of their sort of, you know, their work in Devon, which is absolutely, for me, inspirational. And then I think we can do question and answer at the end, just to give you a chance to have a chat with us, really. So, and there's lots of reading about individual service funds. If you want to get into the detail of it, there's lots of stuff out there where you can read up on the benefits and sort of how they should be working in practice, basically. So that's it. So I'm going to hand over to Gary and Jacqui.
Hello, everyone. Give us a wave. Oh, nice. What a lovely day. So I'll introduce myself while Jacqui's fiddling. I'm Gary Kent. My organisation is called New Key. It's a private organisation. It's run by me and 2 other directors. And we like to think that we offer and try and be really clear about what we do to support people and how we support them, especially around their money and the way we develop and help develop their lives. We're a dom care agency, so we have no residential care. I don't believe in residential care. I think that everybody should have their own front door key and should live in their own home. So that's a little bit about me and my organisation, and I work really closely with social services, of which Jacqui is part of.
Hi, so I'm Jacqui Hendra. I'm a social care assessor with Devon, and I'm also part of Self-Directed Futures, a trainer with them. So part of my role with Devon is undertaking needs assessments and reviews for people across the South Hams area. So we will share with you all about perspectives from both the providers' point of view and the local authorities, highlighting the challenges, the processes and the arranging of ISFs.
So I think for me, I've always believed that if you think about it, that we haven't really got things right within social care commissioning, and the power is always sitting in the wrong place. So for me, my parents left me a residential care home, and they developed a way of thinking. It was a 22-bedded residential care home as well, which I grew up in. So I very quickly realised institutionalisation and what that meant. And when they died and left me the home, I shut it and developed supported living services. Winch hence at that sort of time, I got to know Chris in Dorset. And Chris was talking very much around ISS, which I didn't really know what they were. I knew what a direct payment was, but I had no idea what an ISF was. And I suppose initially then I went and did this work in Dorset with Chris around providers and how they kind of thought and what they should be thinking. And then from that, took that to Devon. And Devon really ran with it, which was really good. I had a really good commissioner called Liz Wood, and she helped to develop an ISF kind of offer within Devon and helped us develop a pilot, which I've been running for the last few years now, and hence how I got to know Jacqui.
So I was first introduced to ISS in 2019 when Devon ran a pilot in a small group of people with learning disabilities. So when the ISS were first discussed, I lacked awareness and understanding about what ISFs were and their potential benefits, and this prevented me from actively promoting them as an option. So some of my thoughts: if an individual service fund are used creatively, but they might not be spent on meeting the eligible outcomes. So I needed to change my thinking around what's seen as traditionally as care and support.
And I suppose really what are the obstacles for me as a provider and for the people we supported really was the legal agreement, social services having to tie taxpayers' money in legally to make sure it's going to be spent in the right way. And I suppose how the money was going to be distributed, I was really used to time and task. So it took a little bit of understanding. We've done a lot of work within the community, but understand we had a lot more freedom to kind of work with. So then my staff really were the hurdles more than the people we supported, kind of so used to rotas, delivering support at certain times and how things were. So, and also how was the money going to be held? As an organisation, we hadn't worked that out, so we've now done that and worked that out. And then we realised that none of the legal agreements were an easy read. You might get a barking noise now. My dog's just returned home. She'll have to come and say hello to me. Sorry. The consultation between kind of understanding the ISF took a lot because it kind of stuck high in commissioning for a long time, and it didn't really go down to Jacqui's level. And then I learned that it didn't go down to my level either. So, and when it didn't go down from my to my staff, it really made me realise actually the power wasn't within the organisation, wasn't within social services. The power of this really had to sit with the person and the staff that work with the person, who really knows what that person needs and how to integrate them within their community and get the best value for money. That was quite a big undertaking, really. And then I actually, from Jacqui, realised I didn't really understand the eligibility criteria. I had no real knowledge of the eligibility criteria. Then with Chris, Jacqui and I, we worked out there actually wasn't, social services were assessing people and there wasn't an easy read eligibility criteria. So how can they assess somebody without actually having it an easy read, explaining how they're assessing? So there's some of the stuff Jacqui and I and Chris worked on quite quickly. And then also the really good thing for me was meeting Rachel Mason and understanding the 247 grid, because this really gave the power to the person to understand where their money was being spent. Even if they didn't have the concept of money, it actually helped them understand red is one-to-one, yellow is sharing and caring, one of them calls it. And it's really kind of a good way of helping someone look at how their money's being spent.
So working in collaboration is key to the successful delivery of individual services. And I spent time with our provider, with Gary in Newquay, developing my understanding and teaching them the Care Act eligibility and how we work as a local authority. And this was extremely positive as it allowed for mutual learning and a better understanding for both perspectives, building a good level of trust between the local authority and the provider. Do you want to add anything?
Well, I just think as well, for me, about outcomes, why does everything have to have an outcome? But actually we all work to outcomes, really, and this was kind of the realism Jacqui and I worked to. Yes, social services wanted that, didn't they, Jacqui? And they wanted that, but one of the things that really kind of got to me was actually we could work to someone's outcomes, but was it an eligible need? And actually understanding that actually social services only can commission, pay for eligible needs. So sometimes I was thinking we're working for outcomes for people and they're not an eligible need. So it was about saying you still can do that, but it can't be paid for by out of that pot of money. So it was really that understanding of what the eligible needs were that was the crux for me and my staff team, and then to develop the understanding for the people we support. Would you think that's a fair comment?
Yeah. So what we've learned, so working in collaboration with providers is key to the successful delivery of individual service funds. It's vital to develop a relationship of trust and be transparent with communication to share best practice and address problems or mistakes so that we can learn together. There can be a focus on genuine person-centered outcomes and collaborative work, which shifts people's ways of thinking from hours to outcomes. The importance of writing good outcomes for individuals and communicating them with everyone that's involved in their care and support is paramount. It's important for all to understand that an individual service fund can be used to meet eligible needs in ways that are different and more creative than what's traditionally seen as care and support. And support staff are now demonstrating the skills needed to research assets in the local community that meet the individual's needs and interests and help them to make the best use of them. It's important for all to understand that an individual service fund can be used to meet the eligible needs in ways that are different and more creative than what is traditionally seen as care and support.
And for me, I think realizing that we create special land for people with learning disabilities and for physical disabilities and mental health. We create this special land that we expect is actually, no, what Jacqui said, use your community, use the assets around you. And what we found was when we started giving people the power to do that, they steered away from special land where we tried to place them, like day services, like training flats, and actually they wanted much more real life experiences. And we've had some great experiences with people about their budgets and how they can be spent.
So speaking within my own local authorities and with other local authorities, social work teams need to know how to suggest and offer an individual service fund to people who could benefit. Understand the importance of your own role in implementing individual service funds. Understand the various models for collaboration, i.e. two-way agreements, three-way agreements, and demonstrate the ability to write good outcomes for individuals and communicate them with everyone involved in the care and support, and demonstrate the skills needed to research the assets in the local community, and understand that an individual service fund can be used to meet eligible needs in ways that are different. So that's really important and key for all local authorities to understand it, because it is different from the way that we have been commissioning services, and we have been working very much a time and task way, and that needs to change.
And I think for me, it was the realism of what we are holding the money to be spent on, and helping the person to understand that, and the staff teams. And when we found that and made some clarity on that, I think it all kind of just slotted into place for people, and actually they come up with some really creative outcomes for themselves.
So we were ensuring that everyone that we went to assess and review had a copy of the easy read eligibility criteria, and their families and their circle of support and the support workers. So we completed a path with everyone, a person-centered plan, to map out their goals and outcomes. We introduced the 247 grid, which is a tool to map out their week. And as they're mapping out onto that weekly planner, the support that's being provided, whether it be one-to-one support, shared support, daytime opportunities, voluntary support, etc., the overall budget that the local authority provides is put onto that grid. And then as the person is putting the colours onto the grid, meaning the red, the one-to-one, the yellow, the shared support, it deducts from the budget that what they are spending. So it enables them to make decisions about how they spend their weekly budget as an overall to meet those eligible outcomes that we discussed and agreed in their care and support plan.
And what we did find at this stage as well was some people who did share and lived in the same house, even though they were on ISFs, they were very hooked on their shared hours being within that house, within the person they were sharing with, and not thinking that they could share hours with other people within the community, other people who weren't actually perhaps even supported by the organisation that you are, and actually thought very creatively about, actually it's not about shared hours around a house, it's about these are my hours and I want to share them with May over there because I like going swimming with May on a Monday. And actually May lives a half a mile away and I pick her up when I go through in my car, or actually May can pick me up, and we can share that support. We don't have to have that one-to-one. We can actually share things and do things together, but not around a house, around people's real lives and friendships, and also developing new colleagues and developing new relationships within their communities.
So we took time training the staff, the support staff that were on the ground working with the person, because they actually know the person best. So it was ensuring that they understood the Care Act eligibility criteria, and that they understood that creating and better understanding of effective and flexible use of hours. So they were then looking at what the community could offer, what the voluntary sector could offer. They were then out there doing the networking. And the people that we support, who had had commission services for many, many years that looked the same, like Groundhog Day, was now out there living their lives and were making choices for themselves.
I think also at this stage, I learned that actually, yes, I can teach that to that member staff and with that person, but when someone new comes to be in, we've just worked this out, Jacqui and I, it needs to be within the core induction of the organisation. We're now building these values into our induction to actually, when people come and start with us, they understand what an ISF is and how the money can be spent and where the power sits with it.
This one's you, Gary.
And I suppose really, if we carry on with this, we've got some case studies. James is one of my favourite. James is one of the first persons who had an ISF, and he lived in a shared house before we supported him with 5 other people, and he was quite unhappy. So he moved in and shared with a friend of his. They had a house for 2. It was commission services, but social services could only spend the amount of money they'd actually already allocated to James. So it meant that James had to go home every 3rd week because every 3rd week there was not enough money for us to support him. So from a Monday to a Sunday night, James had to go home every 3rd week. That was written in stone. When he started getting his ISF, we found out we could be a lot more flexible with it. And James's budget was interesting. 2 things happened here. The first thing about his budget is when we started giving it control to him and his support workers, they couldn't spend it. Where we could, as a commission services, spend it all the time. He actually had too much money. He handed back £14,000 this year which was quite incredible. And we've asked him not to save money. It's just the way he lives his life, by sharing, by doing things within the community, he's saved quite a lot of money within his budget. It's not been taken away from him. It just got handed back, and it's there for him to spend next year. But for an example, one way we did that, James has every 15 minutes eye drops. So he has to have a member of staff with him, and he has to have these 15-minute eye drops so he go blind. And he likes to go to a pub a couple of nights a week. So he actually got really friendly with the barman behind the pub. And with the ISF, we trained the barman to actually put his eye drops in. And then the barman got to the understanding that actually if James walked to the pub, which is quite near his house independently, that he would put the eye drops in for James, not get paid to do it, just do it as part of the community thing. Really happy to do that. And if he wasn't going to be there that night, he would ring and let us know so we can make sure support was with James. It's worked really, really well. And James now goes up to the pub without his member of staff having to put his eye drops in. He's got a friend up there who actually does that with him, who has been trained and actually is now part of his circle of support. So those things are really important to me.
So here we have Janice. So following Janice choosing to have her support commissioned through an individual service fund, and the support completing a 247 grid with Janice, which she shared with me weekly. So I was able to identify formal support was being delivered AM and PM for administration of medication. So I discussed with Janice and her team of support whether a medication dispenser would be a good tool to use, a good bit of equipment to enable Janice to administer her own medication. So Janice and her support team trialled this, and initially the staff were still overseeing, but within a couple of weeks, Janice was actually self-administrating her own medication. So for somebody that has had support for all her life, where somebody else has been managing her medication, giving her a medication each day, Janice is now independent, taking it. And this has been working really well. So just a small piece of equipment like that has made such a difference to Janice. So here we have Trudy. So Trudy also lived in residential care for many years.
She's a star.
She is. And she moved out of residential care into supported living, where she shares with 2 others. Her commissioned service was very stagnant, the same things happening week in and week out. So we discussed an individual service fund with Trudy. She was very keen to give it a go. So the commissioned budget was transferred over to an individual service fund. And Trudy, with her team of support, following a path that we completed to look at her hopes and dreams and her positive and possibles, went out to look at alternatives for daycare. So she had been going twice a week to a daycare facility. And on one of our Zoom calls, she said, "Jacqui, all I do is go on a minibus, eat cake, drink tea and get fat." I'd like to think she did more than that, but that was her words. So I said, "Okay, Trudy, you go away. Here's your budget. You come back and tell me what you want to do differently to meet these needs, i.e. social interaction, access in the community." So she came back a week later and told us that she'd got an allotment. So that's fantastic. She's been out, she's, found herself an allotment, goes along with her support worker. And then before long, other people in the community who we support with similar interests in horticulture joined Trudy. So Trudy was now pooling her budget.
Not with the people within her house.
Yeah. So now, her one-to-one support or the money put there for the one-to-one support is being stretched because she's now sharing support with others, building on friendships also. So yes, a member of staff still goes along to the allotment, but actually there's 2 or 3 others there all pooling budgets, which has been fantastic. Week later, she come back to us and said she found herself a volunteer. So she now goes to a stables one day a week where she is learning animal care, and she's riding, something that she hasn't done for many, many years. In this time, with over like a 18-month period, Trudy's actually lost 1.5 stone in weight. Nothing's changed in her diet. It's purely because she's took control of her life. She's out and about in the community. She's in the allotment. She's riding, and she's out there living.
And also, Trudy has never spent her total budget.
No, so Trudy, as I said, from her commission service, £900 a week was transferred into the individual service fund. Trudy sends her 247 grids to myself and also to Nuki, her provider, as they use that as an invoicing tool. So only what has been delivered is actually invoiced for. Trudy spends anywhere between £650 and £700 a week, and that's not the local authority going in and telling her to make cuts. That's her taking control over her budget and making the changes, and all her eligible outcomes are being met and more by this way of working.
And she knows that her budget's not going to be cut. She's confident it's there if she needs it, but also she doesn't want it. She doesn't have to spend it.
So as I said, the provider gets the 247 grids sent to them weekly, and that's what they use for invoicing. So what we've done here in Devon, when somebody takes up an individual service fund, for the first 6 weeks, the social worker or social care practitioner will zoom in with that person and their support team each week. So look at what's happening, see if there's any changes that need to be made, if there's anything they're concerned about. Initially, some of the support workers were concerned about risks. So we talked a lot about positive risk taking and, you know, working together. Clear, transparent communication has really supported in the success of the ISFs. So the benefits: giving choice and control to the individual, improved outcomes for the individual, and flexibility. And what we found that because the individual service fund is giving that person the ability to use their budget as a whole flexibly to meet their agreed desired outcomes, that is actually, you know, given them a lot of choice and been very positive for all. So responsiveness. Through COVID, so last March 2020, wasn't it, COVID hit us, and actually those that were on individual service funds were able to make the changes. So as we saw services closing, day opportunities shutting down, the person had their budget. They had the flexibility with the provider to make the changes to meet their eligible outcomes. Those that were on a commission service, the community teams were inundated with calls, with waiting list activities, because they needed to come back to the local authority either for more money or to make changes to the care package. But all those on the individual service fund were actually able to make those changes without coming back to the authority. So sustainability: if the individual has successfully managed their own direct payment and their capacity or ability to do so declines, or if a family member has supported this and is no longer able, the ISF arrangement can offer sustainability. So we found this very much so in our ageing population of learning disabilities, where their families were supporting them either with direct payments, but actually felt that they're getting older older now, they're struggling, or they want peace of mind that when they're not here anymore, that their loved one's going to have the flexibility to continue to use their budget as they have with the direct payment. The ISF has been real positive for them for moving forward, and we've seen a number of people do so. We've also seen a number of people ask for an individual service fund because they've seen the difference that it's made to the lives that have moved over from a commission service to an individual service fund.
Do you want to just say about what you're asked now?
Yes, so quite often now I will get calls or WhatsApp, because we've done a lot of technology training with the people that we support, and I get asked from the people we support, what's my budget? Can I have a path? I've worked for the authority for 25 years and I've never been asked by somebody that we support what their budget is. I think often they didn't even realise that, you know, they had a budget. Yes, staff turned up each day and were supporting them, but did they know where the money come from? No. But the way that we're working now, everyone has an understanding. They might not understand the value of money, etc., but they can understand that they can make positive changes to the way their care and support is delivered. They can stretch their budget further and do more things.
I think for me, really, it's about the control. It doesn't sit to me as an organisation. It sits to the person. We've now done a new thing as well. We're now giving people their paths to fill in before their review. So actually they're bringing their review to us, not us saying you're coming to us to be reviewed. They've got the review paperwork beforehand, they work on it, they fill it in. So what's next?
They're just completing the now part on
yes,
the
just the
path.
now,
So what
and
their
perhaps
life
some of their
looks
hopes
like
and dreams
now.
and some of their hopes and dreams. But for me, what next? Everybody we support in Newquay, I would like to think has or will have an ISF, or if it's a commission service, working in the way that an ISF works. I think that's the other thing for me. Just because it's an ISF, it doesn't mean that you still can't work with commission services in that way. And I think it's about people still understanding they have a budget, they've got this amount of money and it can be spent creatively. So for me, it is about people taking the power, the staff training, the inductions. In our organisation, we had a bit of a step backwards because we had a restructure, and some of the people we brought into the restructure wasn't up to speed on all the training. So that held us back. We realised that that's really important for us. So what next is the knowledge being sunk into people we support, to support workers who support those people, and them taking control.
So we want to see person-centred support planning as a way of thinking and doing things that sees people who use health and social care services as equal partners in planning, developing and monitoring their own care and support to ensure that it meets their needs. This means putting the people and their families at the centre of decisions, seeing and respecting them as experts and working alongside professionals to get the best outcome for the individual. So person-centred support planning needs to be at the heart of the individual service fund planning process to ensure that the budgets are used in the most efficient way to achieve the best outcomes for people. Focus outcomes on the individual's wants, needs, interests and preferences, and ensure that everyone across the system is working towards these outcomes, and research what resources are available in the local community, including commissioned and voluntary resources, and share this information with everyone across the system. And support process for integrated person-centred care planning, and consider how partners across the system can pool their resources to get the best outcomes for individuals. Working together to identify the barriers and challenges that are preventing the person-centred support planning, and identifying ways to overcome them and make the required changes. We want to shift thinking from time to task to achieving outcomes. The greater advantage of individual service funds is the flexibility they give the person to use the money in imaginative ways, as long as they are doing so to meet the agreed eligible outcomes. And this is why, for both the person and the local authority and the provider, the plan needs to be clear as possible as regards to the purchase or the purpose of the payment. So this way, the person can confidently use the funds in a creative way, as long as they fit with the plan's intentions.
I think for me as well, I don't know, I'm trying to kind of capture this in such a simple term. We have for years told people what support hours are going to have, how that support hours are going to be delivered. You will have Jacqui work with you on a Monday to Tuesday, Wednesday in these hours, Thursday, Friday at these hours. There's never real flexibility in it. And there's never really kind of the true bridging into the community. And there's never the true kind of flexibility around how we're going in. So we had the social worker who, actually, it's really funny because earlier I was talking to Jacqui and we've had a request come through from him today. And do you want to say what the request is, Jacqui?
To nominate this newly qualified social worker for Social Worker of the Year.
And really he's learned. Do you want to read his quote and I'll just say some of the work we've done?
So this was a quote from Cameron. So Cameron said to us that this can be a complex household, and just because of the financial arrangement, I'll hold my hands up and say that the funding process and paperwork is not my greatest strength. But by using the pathway planning, the PATH, weekly calls and the 247 grid meant that I believe it has actually saved me time, as I have had the opportunity to exercise and explore all the community and strengths-based approaches via the pathway plan. I know the situation well and have a very clear evidence for why a temporary increase was being requested in panel. And as a result, I was able to put together what I feel was the quickest and most robust panel application I've done. This saved me immeasurable time in putting the panel app together. It also meant that it was accepted first time.
And to capture that for me, what he says to me quite clearly, and he's a really great guy, he's newly qualified, came in and he said, I'm so pleased I've met and work in this way. He said, this is what true social work is about for me. He said, and I never expected to be able to see or thought I would be in a position to actually deliver it. He said, I'm doing weekly Zoom calls with people. He says, and when I go on that Zoom call, it puts a smile on my face because I really enjoy working with those people. And I now understand them. And he spent time getting to know them, but not hours and hours, but he's given the things and given back to those people. And now it's made his life easier. Now, the whole point of this is we overcomplicate it, we overthink it. The person who's got the answers is the person themselves. They know what they want from their lives. And then they need to work with their staff team to look at their community, look at volunteers, look at what friends they've got or new friendships they can develop to actually kind of get the best for their life. This is what Cameron's for. This is what he really liked as a social worker. He said, this is true social work to me. And I think Jacqui would say the same. And I would say as a provider, summing up here, this is what being a provider is all about, to deliver a service to the person that they want, not the service we give.
Any questions or comments? Sue, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it was really just to ask two main questions, and one of these was to the first speaker as well, Chris, because this is being explored in our district at the moment, but we have been started from the starting point of the people themselves. So we have run a whole load of sessions with people called the Big Conversation, so that people truly understand. So they people with learning disabilities did little plays. They did work on what is a budget. They played like higher lower with what order do you organise things in, and that creative way of working meant that they truly understood for themselves what choice was, what risk was. As one of them said to me, you know, my mum said, "What do you mean you want to play rugby? You'll get hurt." And he chuckled and replied, "Of course I will, Mum. It's rugby." You know, and it's about being able to make your own choices. So I think it's absolutely amazing the place that you've got to and that understanding. But one of the things I wanted to ask, because it's not mentioned anywhere in the paperwork, and one of the things that is a sticking point really is around, is there a percentage taken by the managing organisation to manage that person's budget? And if it is, then that indicative budget that was set by the authority then has money taken out of it, so they don't have the amount of money that was originally there, because some of that has gone to pay the possible I just want to finish the sentence. So has gone to pay those people who are supporting people to have an ISF. Thank you.
Can you stay on, take yourself off mute, and we have a little conversation here? So I can talk for my organisation and Devon. So we don't charge a service fund. We don't charge for it at all. We do it free. But we do charge if we're not putting any support in. If we hold the budget for somebody and we're doing the path planning and we're helping them kind of pay people, we will put a charge in, which we do for 2 people. So we put no services in whatsoever for those people. If we're putting services in for those people, we don't make a charge. And we actually feel as an organisation, it's less work, to be honest, than actually making more work. So again, we would charge if we weren't putting the service in, but if we're putting the service in and putting over 20% of the support in, we would not make a charge for that at all, and we find it's better. Does that answer that question?
So the management fee, if we are going to be paying a management fee, is additional to the person's weekly budget.
Does that answer
You're
that?
on mute, Sue.
That's excellent, Jacqui, because that's the point we have been discussing with our local authority around that. If people go for an individual service fund, then that needs to be put back up in on top. It's also around conflict of interest has been discussed as well around ISFs, that if you are managing someone's big budget, can you also be a provider of the services they might use? Because if you are, then surely why would you, and this is a really crude but quick answer, why would you direct them anywhere else but to use your services, because then you are supporting your service. So I mean, that's something else that is being discussed as well. There are lots of little sort of potholes that you need to get filled in, and so everybody is clear of the pathway, I think.
With my staff team, if you ask any of my staff what their job is, they will say their job is to make themselves redundant. My job is to keep them in work. The more they make themselves redundant, the more I'm going to want them. So for me, I want every single person we put on an ISF, we've reduced their packages, every single person. And we've actually put it out to other providers as well, because they could do a better job than we could. So for me, but then it is about your provider as well. Some providers aren't as ethical.
I mean, just one final question then, because I don't want this just to be a two-way discussion, is around one of the things that we're exploring pre-COVID, and we were about to start, was that groups of people who had budgets, people with learning disability, mental health service users, were providing their own opportunities. So they were doing services that happened, some in the day, some in the evening. They were putting their money together and deciding what they would do. They'd elected a person to hold the funds, they'd elected somebody to be the treasurer, and they were actually starting to run their own service for themselves, using their budgets the way they wanted.
I love that. We do a similar thing here, to be honest, and we've just done something very similar as well. But also we kind of work on the skills of people and we help them develop their skills. But I think that's aimable, and that's something I'd love. So we'd, as an organisation, we'd worship that.
So that could be part of a direct payment or an individual service fund, whichever works best for the person.
Any other questions from anyone? Got to be somebody.
I think Katie had her hand up before. Can I help you unmute?
I unmuted and you muted me back.
Oh, sorry.
Hello, that's fine. Sorry, I've had to move around a bit to plug my iPad in. Yeah, and I've been interested in ISFs for a long time, and thank you very much for really excellent presentation, everyone. I've spoken to Chris in the past about ISFs, because it's something, to me, it seems like a magic wand scenario, because I work in a team of brilliant PAs, and we really have changed, and in fact I think saved people's lives working in the way that we do. But obviously we're all getting older, hate to admit it, but we are. And so I thought ISF's there on the horizon for the future. But this brilliant team of PAs, the current team, if we went with another provider, we've got to find a provider that would hold our budget. And what would happen to the employment of those PAs in terms of, I would hope that they would be supported to continue to be as brilliant and as creative as they are. But if it was, Joe Blogg's provider, then would they have to fall under their policies and procedures, etc.?
So Jacqui, we can give you a live example of this. We supported a lady do her path not 6 months ago, and we don't put any of the support in, and we helped her employ PAs. So we supported this lady to get her own. Now, we could have muscled in and said, yes, we want it as a business, but we didn't, because actually we couldn't do it as well as the PAs are doing it. And we just held her review a few weeks ago, and the family and herself were so blown away with the outcomes of what she's managing with her PAs.
So the provider has oversight of it.
So I have to make sure she's got insurance, and I have to make sure she's doing DBS, because I hold the budget, yeah. But actually, we put no support in for this lady whatsoever. And she has a PA team, but we oversee making sure that actually everything's in place and we pay the PAs. And
then meeting the outcomes that we all agreed.
I see. That's brilliant. That is really helpful. Can I just ask another question? Do other providers who hold ISFs, do you work out of area, or are you only in your local geographical area? Because if people hold budgets like that, to me, within the world of technology, you can, I could come to you from North Yorkshire and say, you could do what you were saying you could do up here in North Yorkshire.
I've never been asked that. That's quite a good one.
Yeah, but I just think finding the right provider or the right team, the service to hold that ISF is critical, really, for continuing that great support that this one particular person I'm thinking of receives currently, or is part of his community.
Technically, I can't see why.
Yeah, because not, but the local authorities do sign up with certain providers.
They do.
Well,
but if someone goes out to the county, so we have people we support who their local authorities, Oxfordshire, say. So we're actually paid by Oxfordshire, and we run that with that person, but we're accountable to Oxfordshire Social Services. Yeah. So I couldn't tell you the legalities on this, but what you're thinking, like you have people in Devon, elsewhere. So the legalities is, yes, I suppose you could, I think.
It would be down to the local authority to sign up with that provider on terms and conditions.
Yeah, well, yes, quite. So I won't take up anyone else's time, but I think sometimes
good question, though. That was
we're much more progressive than the local authorities are. So, if I found a good provider somewhere else, I would want to use that rather than having to. I won't say anymore. Thank you very much.
Another hand up, I see.
Lots to think about there. Yeah. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
I'll try and mute myself again now.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
I you see ability innately. And what I'm finding at the moment is I get supported by the ability, but over the couple of months, it's been really difficult. with people leaving, and it been really tough for me, and we got lost our manager as well. It been really difficult this year.
I think very difficult times.
Yeah.
And in social care, there's a lot of really big, Jacqui knows this. I've got to go into work when I finish this tonight now, because we're very short staffed at the moment because of COVID and different things. So it is very difficult.
It's the thing here. It's some sort of stuff.
It is it's not just you. Please have a bit of faith. It's all over the country, isn't it, Jacqui?
Yeah, it's been very strange times for everyone, Gabby. And at the moment, because of all the track and trace, we're seeing more carers go out, even though, you know, we're having negative test results. So it has been difficult for, you know, people that need the support, getting the support also. But let's hope that things get better.
Yeah.
Can I say it was really nice to raise that, though, because to know that it's not just you and your organisation, it's everywhere. It's not a comfort, but it's actually an understanding that it isn't a failure of everybody. It's just the way things are in these hard times.
Yeah.
Thanks, Gabby.
Anybody else?
Not really. That it really difficult at the moment. I'm trying to be independent. Like, I've been here 6 years, and I know it. And I'm trying to one day move out to my own place. And it just really difficult.
Make sure you move out one day. That's a really good dream and really good hope, and it should happen.
And then let's hope
Keep
you
strong.
can have an individual service fund or a direct payment, Gabby, and then you'll be able to buy in your payment. That would be fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. Any more questions from anyone or comments?
Lorraine, you put a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to ask that. Yes, Gabby.
I got
okay.
it, but thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome, Gabby. Thank you for joining us.
See you later, Gabby.
I'm actually on holiday, but
oh wow.
Oh, see, it's Scott making you work too hard.
I don't mind.
Go and enjoy your holiday then. We'll see you next time.
I'm going to Butlins next week.
Well, I hope the weather keeps nice.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
So anybody put anything in the chat, because I haven't had a chance to have a look at it, that you would just like to call out the question if you'd like us to answer anything? If not, Chris and I will have a look later and respond to anything.
Lorraine, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I did have a question. It's in relation to the people that you're supporting who you start having discussions with about the fund itself. And I'm just wondering if that raises anxieties for anybody, you know, because there's for a lot of people, I guess this will be maybe their first exposure to budgets and sort of having that sort of maybe seen as a responsibility. And I'm just thinking, like all of us, that sort of causes some additional stress in our lives. And I just wondered if you'd seen any raised anxieties, and if you had, how they were managed.
I think initially, yes, because it was a new thing and people didn't understand it. So, you know, it did raise some concerns. We have easy read documents to explain what the ISF is, and that certainly has helped. And just really the provider, the social care worker, speaking with the person and the family about the ISF. If it doesn't work for that person, they don't have to remain on it. You know, they've got the choice to.
No, I think everybody has a right to know what their budget is. and I think a lot of people don't know what their
They
budget
do. I was just wondering whether you'd noticed whether that had caused any sort of difficulties for people. I mean, I absolutely agree with you. I just wondered whether it had, and whether how that would be managed, really. But
the point I would say to that is staffing. Okay, so if my staff, which we didn't do properly in the first place, was train the staff. So when that person came along, the initial talks with the staff, it was new to the staff and new to the person.
Sure.
So when they went back, the staff wasn't able or confident enough to talk about it with them. So actually that raised anxiety. If you hit your staffing right and talk to your staff first, hit that staff team. So when those people go back, there's people who are qualified, or not qualified, but able to actually understand the questions and help that person through it. Better. So I suppose the power going downwards, not sitting in the top of the organisation, is important.
And I think not finding that so much an issue now, because there's so many positive you know, stories out there from the ISF, and as you know, carers speak with each other, families speak with each other, so actually we're getting more and more people come to us requesting it now, rather than us having to, you know, talk about the ISF.
Sure. Yeah, that's fantastic. And you're right. The key will be in the sort of the planning and the preparation, won't it? And getting, you know, staff on board and planning
making
on board.
Sure when they go back, the people who are supporting them have the knowledge to kind of
make
the right answers, not the manager.
I think that's a really important point, isn't it? I think, you know, because there's the potential, I guess, for people to sort of really stress out about that sort of thing if those sort of processes aren't in place. So it's really good to hear.
We also held some days where families, community could come along and hear about ISS and the meaning, and question and answering sessions.
Brilliant. That's really good.
Sue, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, it was really just to emphasise it's that two-way street, and if you can get, you know, instead of a hammer, using a gentle approach with your local Department of Health and Wellbeing or wherever. You know, in Bradford, social workers come along to self-advocacy organisations and sit and participate in sessions to get that understanding of what people want. They rebelled against using the 68 or whatever it's got to now page review form and actually do a talking session. So that form is filled in later, but they collect all they need by just speaking to that person. And I think there's also the recognition that you need, and I have mentioned this, but it's really powerful for me that so many people don't realise it's their choice, because things have already, for so long, to people, raising that level of awareness around people who get budgets, that, you know, the number of people who said to me, Sue, so I have a say in this? This is my choice?
Yeah.
And it's like people, and like you say, people didn't even know what their budget was. But once they know they've got that control, you change that person too, you know, because you raise their confidence, they become happier, they become healthier, they use services less because they understand that they've got control over their life. I know that's not possible for everybody, but, you know,
to extent, everybody, to extent. So I think, you know, you could talk about somebody with highly complex needs, but actually they could be on a one-to-one, but you still can make them more independent by helping them even just make their own tea or make, you know, so it's all about how you work with someone.
And we're hearing more and more from the people where we support saying it's my choice, you know, and yes, it is. So that's great.
Any other questions anywhere else in the room? Well, thank you all. Jacqui?
Everything for me. Chris, anything you want to add?
No, just say thank you. It's been a really, really great session.
Yeah, and we're very happy. And if anybody's got any questions for me afterwards, I'm much better by phone. I'm really dyslexic, so give me a ring and I'll pick the phone up and chat to anybody about anything.
Great, thank you. And I'll make sure that I share all of the contact details and the slides and things from today, probably tomorrow now, I imagine. But thank you very much for all of our presenters and for all of you for coming along and asking your questions as well. Before you go though, I just want to flag, that Keyring are currently doing some work that's connected to this. So they're looking at how people can share budgets and pool their budgets. So kind of what Jacqui and Gary were talking about earlier, a bit of, and they're really interested in people's experiences of that, whether you've thought about it and then decided not to because it looked a bit hard, or whether you've done it. I'm going to send a survey out with the follow-up stuff, and it would be great to hear if you guys have any experiences of that. They're going to share what they find, and if they make some resources, they're going to share those too. So it'd be fabulous if you guys would be up for that. But thank you very much for coming, everybody, and I hope to see you at some future webinars. See you later. Have a good afternoon.
Well.
See you later.
Bye all.
Cheers all. Thanks very much.
Thank you.